in an odd way, is it also that the money that would be necessary to figure out that mess sort of doesn't, it's hard to justify trying to spend that money when it's
Yeah, yeah,
you
yeah.
said,
Well,
that's
I
not
mean,
what your
yes and no.
job
Like,
is.
I mean, I will say this: the reason this label exists is because one of the reasons, at the time Matt and I were talking about it, you could not find Cro-Mags Age of Quarrel anywhere in digital world, minus YouTube bootleg stuff. You could not find it. It didn't exist. And our thing was like, we got to do something. That record needs to exist. Age of Quarrel is a fucking legendary record. Like, so that was one of the things. So when it became something we thought we could work with, we were all in, because we're like, okay, this is the mission. Like, we are going to be the guys who gets Age of Quarrel buttoned up and cleaned up and make sure John and Mackie and Paris and Doug and Harley are all paid equally. It's all going to be this. And then would we pay more money for that? Then it's probably worth, yeah, probably a little bit. But at the end of the day, like, it's time management too. Like, I got other records that I already need to put out. I spent a lot of time this year working on this Cro-Mag stuff, a lot of time. And then it's just like, you look at those lost hours and you go like, okay, like, we can't spend too much more of our time going forward on things that aren't clean, meaning that they're not coming to us with already ready to be bought. It's like, when it's tangled like that, it's frustrating because if you could just get in a room with people like, let's figure this out, like, it makes no sense for anyone else but us to do it. You're not doing anything. Like, you're not going to be able to sell it to anyone else but us. We want to pay for it. But it's also, how do you best use your time? And that's not really how we want to use it right now. So we're just trying to kind of back off and go after stuff that's already buttoned up. I mean, dude, I've been doing this for a long time. Like those records that were on Dutch East India, Giant Records, Uniform Choice During the Sun, Government Issue Records, the Verbal Assault Records, Dag Nasty Field Day. Dude, we tried. That's another thing I tried most of this year, trying to find that dude, trying to figure out how we can get those masters, talking to like, at the end of the day, like, you look back, like, fuck, I spent like 20 hours of my life this year on something that hasn't succeeded. Like, I gotta, like, not do that again, learn from my mistakes, not spend so much time trying to but when you're doing this record label, it's hard not to, because that's kind of the fun part, the detective work of like, we're gonna go get Uniform Choice Staring in the Sun and re-release it. 20 hours later, like, shit.
Well, it's interesting because I was talking with a distributor once, and he was telling me about how, the films that he picks up, and I'm all, well, how do you get that? How do you figure out the rights? And he said, like, oh, I just go on IMDb Pro, and it's all sort of set up, who owns what films, blah, 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 blah.
Yeah.
But I'm thinking there's not something like that for what you're doing. Like, you're literally...
There is, and there isn't. Like, normally, in our world, the punk rock hardcore thing, it's a little bit messy because contracts are written.
There weren't really any for a lot of the bands.
Yeah, but there are some. I mean, you'd be surprised how many people sign contracts. But the problem is the contracts are kind of, this is before computers. The contracts are like pieces of paper with, like, not all the stuff makes sense, and it doesn't seem like it hold up. Yeah, but at the end of the day, like, what we do is, like, our part of our label. The point is to, like, get control of the masters, meaning the record. Make sure that everyone on that record is paid equally, because that's how we roll, and are paid twice a year, or at least get statements twice a year if they're not owed money. They at least know where they're at. And that's kind of, we want to be the guys cleaning that up. So there is no, like, if someone comes to me and goes, hey, we want to license Circle Jerks, deny everything for a film, like, I can do it in a second because I know the writers, I know the breakdowns. It's a Google Doc, it's a freaking Excel spreadsheet I have. Like, I go, okay, here it is. And, but before, that's kind of the point of our label. We're existing to try to get this clean and organized and controlled. And some of the labels still do a good job and do it, like, and some don't. That's just nature of life. I'm sure in movie land, there's some just film companies who have their rights buttoned up. And look at Sylvester Stallone. You guys hearing about how he lost all the rights to Rocky to Erwin Winkler? Is that true?
Yeah.
He's slicing his bitter about it. I saw him on a thing. He was not stoked. Like,
well, that's because Erwin Winkler, who I believe is still alive, wants to do certain things with it, and that's why Stallone isn't involved with Creed.
Yeah, he's not involved. He doesn't control his masters anymore.
Yeah.
But somewhere in there, that got. I mean, legally he must have sold it, or we wouldn't just be like, you can't just like, you know.
But that's the thing.
But the point I'm saying is not. It's not everything's buttoned up and clean. Even it depends, you know.
Well, are you finding with trust now, and maybe you always found this, but that now people see your products, they see the work that is going into it. Do you find, are you having bands kind of, I mean, or has it always been this way? Are bands kind of coming to you now? Like,
Yeah, bands have reached out. That's a hard part of this job too. It's like,
because you can't do everything.
thank you everyone, but I respect all these bands. I love it. Like there's so many bands that hit us up. We're like, I love this band, but it's not. You know, we got to look at it as like we got to at least be able to. If we're gonna put time into these packages, unfortunately, we got to sell at least 3,000, 4,000 of the records to make it worthwhile. But that doesn't mean all the bands, don't. You know, there's a place for all kinds of bands on our label, like big and small. Like, we've talked about getting old demos and getting 7-inches and getting stuff that's not real revenue generators, but still classic, and putting them on our label. And then we've tried to figure out ways like, okay, if like say a smaller band comes to us that we can't do this for, where do we put them? Like, can we still sign them and get their records out? Because at the end of the day, like all we want to do at the end of this is have all the digital rights for all these stuff, like a huge catalog of that, streaming and protected and being handled. So maybe maybe that there's a place for it. I think part of the problem is like if that's not as exciting to a band, say like, great man, we're gonna buy your great 12-inch that you're so proud of and put it out on Spotify for you. Well, that's not exciting.
Well, no, it's not exciting. It should be. It's not exciting, but I remember I had a movie. People came to me and they were like, we just want the internet. And I was like, like exactly what you said. It's not exciting. But then later I saw that company was then bundled with DVD players. So every DVD player that was coming out from this certain brand had that company's stuff on it. My stuff would have been on that. So I think it's sort of that long range idea. Yeah. But when you say smaller acts or newer acts, are you only talking legacy stuff, or are you talking like would Trust delve into a modern band?
No, it's all legacy stuff, and that happens all the time. I get hit up weekly by bands submitting demos, and and I feel so bad because it's like this long email about who their band is and everything that's gone into trying to sell me on the thing, and all I can say without even finishing the email is like, oh, thank you for reaching out. Unfortunately, we only do reissues, but best of luck to you. So like, I'm giving a fucking 30-second response to an email I know took some dude hours to craft the way he wanted to craft. And that always makes me feel terrible because, like, I've been on that end of it too, trying to sell something to someone and you put all something like, oh, thanks, I'm not interested. And you're like, damn it. But I will say this, we don't know where it begins and we don't know where it stops as far as the timeline. Because when we first started this, I think we thought we'll be in like kind of the early to mid 80s reissues. But then there'll be some stuff you see coming out that's maybe a little more. I mean, we talked about it like, if that band Have Heart got their masters back and they wanted to do deluxe reissues, I don't see why we wouldn't do it.
And now, why would they have to get their masters back? Could you not just go to the label?
It's hypothetical.
Okay.
There was Bridge 9, and Chris does a great job with Bridge 9. I'm saying hypothetically, some bands are like that band Title Fight.
Right.
That band Title Fight was like, hey, can you release our record in deluxe treatment? Or like if Turnstile was like, can you release our first record under Trust? Like, yeah, I think we would have to because I can see the connection between Turnstile and 7 Seconds. I mean, it's there. There's a path to it. But we just never, it's an evolving thing. Like what we're trying to do, preserve this kind of music and this culture. Like, where does it end? It doesn't, and does it also, I'm 52. Like, I shouldn't be the gatekeeper of what's on here. Like, we should bring in some stuff that I'm not all that, I would say, like, not really my jam, but I respect it enough that it has a place. Because that's the thing about this hardcore scene, and you're part of it. Like, there's a place for everyone. There's a place for Ice, which was your band. There's a place for freaking Uniform Choice.
We're going to be on Trust.
Like they all swim in the same stream. Some might be a little bit more visible, but they're all kind of in part of the scene. That's the point of the scene, was it's all of us together. Big and small, fans and bands are one. There's no dividing lines. There's no classism. You know.
Well, that is where the idea of the whole streaming thing, what I would, if I was in a band, that's at least how I would look at it. Like, okay, wait, we wanted the deluxe treatment, but wow, at least we're going to be part of this thing.
Yeah,
that
you're
is
being part of this thing, and so, but I don't know if we're there yet. Like,
right.
You know, Crust is still. I don't think we're even at 7,000 followers on Instagram. You know what I mean? Like, we're still pretty small. This 7 Seconds record's our 5th record. Now, by the end of 2023, we'll be on record 10. So that's why I say pedal to metal is like we're going to double our input in 1 year, and then from there try to get to this 8 to 10 release, physical releases packaged with, you know, maybe some stuff that just we curate that goes into streaming, but we still do like some marketing around it. We still celebrate it. It's just not physical. But I don't know. You know, we're not there yet. And then also another thing too is like we're trying to make this. It's not just a California-based label. So like that's another reason why we've kind of slowed down. Was like we just don't have enough East Coast blood. That's why SSD is so exciting to us because SSD's legendary Boston band,
right.
and I think at some point we got to get into New York hardcore. We got to get into some of this. You know, I mean, I even talked about Face Value. I talked to Tony Urba about Face Value's record that came out on I think Dennis and Hartsfield's label.
Conversion, yeah.